public records requests, but stonewalling them. And the state law requires an answer on public records requests of 72 hours. You got to get back and let people know that, yes, we have this record and here it is, or you can come look at it. And that's not happening right now. And I think all the candidates need to be held to account on that. And not that they violated it, but to make them commit to honoring the law, the spirit as well as the letter of the law going forward. Because if we don't have that, it's going to be very difficult for citizens to hold public officials accountable.
And to bring Nellie back in on this, doing public records requests or having this transparency as a journalist is one thing. Having it as a community member or an activist or an advocate of some degree may read something totally different. From your perspective, Nellie, why is this transparency so important?
Government thrives when people have access to the information they need, right? Democracy is founded on an idea that everybody has a role to play in the systems that we build locally, that we create in order to keep everyone in community with one another, thriving. And if you can't see what's going on, it can feel like someone's hiding something.
Democracy dies in the dark.
Democracy dies in the dark.
Yes.
Well
That's
put.
the problem.
I believe it was a journalist who said that. But it's important not just for the news media, who of course helps us all access the information, but for the average resident to be able to see that our government is showing up for us, is listening to us, because really that's what democracy is about.
All right. Nellie, appreciate your insight.
Thank you so much.
All right, Clancy, any other final thoughts here?
I do have a question for you, Clancy, about and this is something that you can answer while we switch in between our stakeholders here. My question for you is, we heard so many different responses or ideas when it comes to economic development from all three candidates. They all had very distinct industries that they thought would be good to invest in. I have them here. I think I can, I know that Oliver Thomas said tourism and biotourism. Senator Duplessis said expansion in the terminals and Charity Hospital and bioengineering. And also Councilwoman Moreno said small businesses, entrepreneurs, and mom and pop stores and businesses, for lack of a better term. So why do you think that is, that there are such different answers to that question? And is there a right answer?
Well, first of all, I was a small business owner with my wife for almost 30 years when we owned Gambit. And I can tell you that small businesses are the backbone of any community. But the truth is, there is no wrong answer, at least none that we heard tonight. The reason we heard so many divergent or diverse answers to that question is because all of those answers are correct. We need to harness more from the port. New Orleans exists here because of the Mississippi River. Without that river, we'd be, we might not be here. There would be no New Orleans. New Orleans East, as Oliver Thomas said, you can't talk about growing the city unless you grow the other half. The truth is, the 9th Ward is 2/3 of the land mass of the city. So more than half the city is east of the Industrial Canal in terms of land mass. Small business, we talked about that. Biomed, several of them mentioned that. All of these things are important. Tourism, of course. You can't, there's nothing you can do wrong in that arena as long as it's done in a way that encourages growth and investment. And yes, we have to encourage young entrepreneurs as well. I remember my dad telling me when I was a teenager, I think everybody ought to be in business. It's because he was a businessman. His father was a businessman. It's kind of in my DNA. So, entrepreneurship is what built this country in terms of economically. And, we have to harness that kind of spirit here in New Orleans. And I was particularly impressed with Councilmember Moreno's mention that, I think she said the city of Austin has several dozen people working in their Department of Economic Development, whereas New Orleans has 5 or 6 people. And yeah, we do need to pump up the Department of Economic Development if we're going to really jumpstart economic development in New Orleans.
course, will be part of the next conversation we have with some other stakeholders who are now joining us in studio.
Yes, we have Andronica Morris with the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance and Deshae Greeley from New Orleans East Matters. And thank you both so much for being here. We heard a lot about both subjects that you all are passionate about. I do want to start with you, Andronica. We talked specifically about housing tonight,
yes,
and how much is needed and how to get there. Can you talk just from your perspective about what is reasonably achievable in the next few years?
So I want to thank you guys for having that question and circling back around to it twice. It is reasonably achievable. We've got 40,000 vacant homes right now. 10,000 of them are occupiable tonight. Could be home to some of the 28,000 people who've been pushed out, or the 1,000 of homeless children we have in this city, or folks who are in our shelters and on the streets of New Orleans. So this is all very possible. The needs that we have can be met. A lot of the problems that we have are rooted in this insurance crisis. We have people getting pushed out because it's too expensive for people to operate homes as businesses to rent to people at any level. And it's too expensive for people to stay in their homes. We've seen that most of the people who've been pushed out are people making less than making $12 an hour. That should be good money in a place like New Orleans. It's just we have this mismatch, but we have the units, we have the built units, and we do need to build more because we're still down over 100,000, mostly African Americans who still have not come home after Katrina.
When you heard the candidates tonight, did anything stick out to you, or did you latch onto something that says, hey, I agree, and can actually be done? Were you hopeful with anything?
I mean, yes, we heard that people are talking about the numbers, talking about what is possible, looking back at our history and saying we've done this before, we need to continue to do it, and we need the resources to do that. We also heard folks talk about the trust fund, that those dollars are going to get deployed next year. The people of New Orleans overwhelmingly, 75% of New Orleanians last year said take some of our money and invest in us. That we need to make sure this election cycle honors that commitment. There's also going to be some key votes later on this year to make sure that that commitment isn't undermined.
I saw you nodding your head. Can you elaborate? What about that did you agree with?
I would agree with what she's saying because we're hearing about the trust fund as well with Lincoln Beach right now and trying to utilize some of that money that they can give back to these projects that can flourish and thrive. So with what we've given, much we want to take back because we need it.
How many of the issues that we spoke about tonight or asked about are all intertwined? They drive right back. Oh my gosh, the reaction immediately. You're like, yes, okay. So I mean, it's the incomes and the population loss and the housing and the economic situation. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Being New Orleans East, although I'm with New Orleans East Matters, but as a resident of New Orleans East, before I was New Orleans East Matters, it was always about our tax base, our revenue, job revenue, having economic conditions. We was talking about NORD, and I was remembering how my children, 4-year-old, and they aged out of NORD, and how those programs are still needed. And when we talk about economic conditions, how we're having to go outside of New Orleans East, when we have the land, the rail, the air, and everything, we almost like an afterthought in New Orleans. And what we want to be inclusive, having to spend your money in a Jefferson Parish, in a St. Bernard, in St. Tammany. Why? Because we need to have what we go out to buy in New Orleans East.
You know, in New Orleans East in particular, there's been a lot of talk about that district and that area in this campaign. You had each candidate tonight talking about their specific plans. Helena Moreno wants to set up an economic development office with a group specifically focused to New Orleans East. You had Thomas talking about all the changes that he's already made and some of the things that he's kind of led there. Duplessis talking about having a different conversation when it comes to New Orleans East and its image problem. I feel like all three of those need to be coupled together, which I'm sure you would agree with. But what of those three, if you could say, is kind of the one you lean to or the one you think is more feasible?
I'm going to say I heard Nellie earlier speak about we already working on it. We already have a plan. There shouldn't be no more tests, no more surveys, no more meetings, no more anything. We need to sit down at the table. I liken to what they said about the Super Bowl. They brought everybody in the room. Everybody needs to be in the room. Anybody who has to make a decision, who has to think about the funding, who has to attract the businesses, everybody needs to be in the room. And so when I think about all the things that the candidate says, all of those things need to be done. All of them. If we can culminate all of those into one, then I know New Orleans East can thrive and move forward.
And do you have some thoughts on that as a housing advocate?
So of course we say put housing first because that's the foundation of a city, of a community. We live together. And so we need to be able to ensure that everyone has safe, decent housing that they can afford and that they can count on. And that how do you get to that is the jigsaw puzzle that you all were just talking about. It's not just a box. It's also opportunity. It's also thoughtfulness and programs. And it's not just enough that you have a place to sleep, is that you have access to opportunities. You can actually get on a bus and get to the park. Right. You can get to school. You can get to work, whatever it is. And if you just don't want to leave your house, and you don't have to.
And that's sharing in the entire New Orleans. Yes. We always think that we have housing. We have our share of it. And yeah, we can spruce up what we have already, because that's the thing. We have so many blighted areas and apartments and things of that nature. Let's fix those. We don't need to add more. Just fix those that are there now.
Right. And we can talk about bringing people home. A lot of those people have been pushed out of those homes. That's why they're empty and vacant.
Well, thank you both so much. I know you both do such important work. Such thoughtful answers tonight. Thank you both. We certainly appreciate it. And we're going to hear more from some community stakeholders as our post-mayoral debate special continues.
You know, Clancy, when you talk about New Orleans East, you talk about affordable housing. These are really big talking points for candidates. But for folks like these ladies, they're more than just talking points. It's part of their daily lives.
No, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in the East. This is the stuff that hits home. And as Ms. Greeley was talking, and she talked about everybody needs to be in that room, I was reminded of that wonderful song from Hamilton, The Room Where It Happens. And it's what happened with the Super Bowl. We got everybody in the room where it happens, where the decisions are made, and everybody got on the same page. And I think it's telling that her point that, you know, we don't need any more studies, we don't need any more meetings. We already have the plan. Let's implement it and get everybody at the table in the room where it happens and make the commitment and put the resources behind the plan to implement it, because between that and managing expectations, as was said earlier, those are the tough challenges for the next mayor.
Candidates had three distinctive kind of takes on New Orleans East in particular. I want to ask you too, your thoughts on their takes on how to redevelop and spur some economic development there.
Well, it's like the general question on economic development. None of those answers were wrong. They're all part of a bigger puzzle. I think you need to do all of those things. It's an all of the above. There is no silver bullet for economic development. There is no silver bullet for fixing the challenges and addressing, I should say, not fixing, but addressing the challenges that face New Orleans East. The people out there know the problem. They're looking for the answers. They're looking for the same thing everybody else in New Orleans is looking for. They're looking for attention. They're looking for resources. They want their streets to be smooth and safe. They want streets to be well lit. They want playgrounds. They have good lighting and good programs for kids, not just little bitty kids, but like when I was a kid, I got to play Nord football, baseball, and basketball until I was 16 years old. That's what got me and many others in my generation, black and white, on a good path in life, because we learned about teamwork. We met friends that we otherwise might not have had because they came out, tried out for the team, and made the team. And we learned how to get along. We learned how to compete. We learned how to lose. You know, those are all important life lessons. And we had great mentors and our coaches who were all volunteers. And we need to get that kind of spirit back in Nord. And that's just one piece of the puzzle for making New Orleans the kind of city that we all want it to be.
All right, thank you, Clancy. Now for more reactions from another pair of audience members. We're checking in with two ladies who are working to help young people who, of course, will be our future
Yeah,
leaders.
we can't talk about the future of New Orleans without talking about young people. We welcome Maggie Herman and Sierra Gaines from the Children and Youth Planning Board. Thank you both so much for being here. We heard you ask your question during the debate, or set up the question for us, and you talked about NORD, and I want to ask you how, just to elaborate a little bit more on how important NORD is to youth in New Orleans.
NORD, along with any place in New Orleans, should come as a safe space for young people. It should be somewhere where they know in their community they can get to, whether that's right after school or it's been a long day before the morning starts. It should be somewhere that they feel that they can go with the right amenities. It's safe for them to go to. Their parents can know that they could go there and be safe and come back home. So NORD to me is just a safe space. It's a safe haven, and it's funded by it should be funded by the city. So it should be somewhere they should always be able to count on.
When you talk about this 10-year plan for the youth, 5 years into it, have you seen substantial change?
Substantial by definition, yes. We've seen a few things be implemented that has been great for the young people, just like the Opportunity Pass, which employs young people to get on the bus for free for a certain amount of time throughout the year. And that is free to them to get to and from work, to them to use for 24 hours throughout the day, and it always re-up, and it always replenishes. So I've seen changes like that. I've seen young people find their voice, because one part of our youth master plan is youth voice. So we've seen more youth leaders come up, and more young people feel empowered to advocate for themselves. So I've seen those type of changes, but with the lack of funding that we have been unable to implement big changes that not only will young people see, but they'll feel and they'll empower them more.
We saw all three of our candidates, we asked them about the commitment to investing in youth, and they all had different answers. Councilman Thomas said after school programs and tutoring programs. Royce Duplessis said he wanted a 0 to 3 universal pre-K, and Helena Moreno said the Big Green Easy Plan and crisis teams to enforce truancy. Can you talk a little bit about which of those align with the plan, or which of them do you think could have success in New Orleans?
I think an important thing to remember with the plan is that it's about investing in our young people from birth to 24. And so if we're investing in early care and education, we have to, yes, invest there. And then when young people inevitably become older than 5, we have to invest in out-of-school time programming for them, so they have safe places to go, like Sierra said. We also have to invest in workforce development and job training programs. And then also young people don't live single issue lives. And so when we have programs for young people, and especially programs that are staffed by caring adults who really know how to work with young people, who really care about their voice and their way that they want their programs to be, it's really important that they have funding from all kinds of angles. So some of the things they named are in alignment with the plan, like out-of-school time programming, like early care and education, and then also preventative services and making sure that we're investing in restorative approaches and not preventative or not punitive approaches.
You know, generations change all the time. When it comes to youth in particular, do you think they're being brought to the table as much as they should be these days?
I'm going to let Sierra answer that question as a young person and a young person who works with a lot of other young people raising their voice.
I feel that based off of what, I have 3 generations that are currently living in New Orleans, in Orleans Parish. So telling them about the work that I do and the wonderful things that they say about me, and they love talking about me to everybody in the community, I feel that young people have been brought to the table in a way that we haven't seen in past generations. And we're not only are we being brought to the table, we're making the table. Like, we're saying, okay, we could be in a room with y'all and we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we're also have this table ready for us on the side, because we know we are the future. So we're being brought to the table. We're also crafting our own table on the side, because we know that this is a intergenerational change that we're doing, and it just looks a little different than things that have happened in the past. So we're being brought in. It is different. We are there, and a bit better than what I've seen from and heard from past
The
generations.
youth of our city is the future of our city. Ladies, thank you so much for the work you do and for being with us on this post-mayoral debate. And of course, thank you all as well for joining us. And we hope to see you right back on Channel 4 on election night.
Certainly. Our live coverage starts at 7. This is Saturday, October 11th. We've got expert analysis, and we will also have the first returns as soon as the polls close at 8.
And until then, be sure to stay with WWL Louisiana for all of the latest election updates. Have a great night.